She stood at the front of the small chapel, dressed in black from head to toe. The flowers around her were white and soft, like they were trying to bring some peace into the heavy silence. People she knew, some well, others just by face, sat, quietly, some crying, some staring blankly ahead. She didn't cry. Not anymore. Her tears had come and gone, leaving behind a hollowness she couldn't explain. This was her husband's funeral. Just a few weeks ago, life had looked so different. They had been sitting on their porch swing after dinner, the sun dipping low, painting the sky with orange and pink. He laughed about something silly, maybe a joke he'd heard at work or something his coworker had done. That laugh, it was full, warm, and contagious. She remembered how it felt to be wrapped up in that moment, thinking this was how life would always be. Then came the phone call, a car accident, a split second, gone forever. She still blinked sometimes, expecting him to walk through the door, keys jingling, tired but smiling. But the door stayed closed. Now here she was, surrounded by memories, grief, and people who wanted to say kind things but didn't know what to say. And then there was him, his brother, Liam. Tall, quiet, always a little off to the side of family gatherings. Not cold, not mean, just distant. She barely knew him. Daniel hadn't spoken much about him, only said things like, "He's doing okay," or "We'll catch up one day." But years passed and one day never came. At the wake, she moved slowly through the crowd, accepting hugs and handshakes, hearing the same phrases over and over. "I'm so sorry. He was such a good man. You're so strong." Strength didn't feel like power. It felt like survival. Then Liam appeared beside her, holding 2 glasses of water. He offered one to her without saying anything at first. She took it, surprised by the simple gesture. "I didn't get to say goodbye," he finally said, voice low. "We weren't close, me and Dan. But he was my brother. I miss him." She nodded, taking a sip. "I think about him every minute," she whispered. They stood in silence for a while, watching as people talked softly, some laughing even, remembering the good times. Then Liam turned to her again, and something in his eyes changed. Like he was trying to find the courage to say something big. "I don't want you to feel alone," he began. "I know this is the worst time. I know it probably sounds crazy, but I can't keep pretending." He paused, swallowed hard. "I care about you. I have for a long time. And I know this isn't normal, but I also know we could help each other through this. You don't have to go through this alone." Her heart stopped for a second. Was he really saying what she thought he was? "But we barely know each other," she managed to say. "I know," he replied quickly. "But I've seen the way he looked at you, the way you loved him. And I guess I've always wondered what it would be like to be loved like that. By someone like you." She didn't answer right away. She couldn't. Her mind was spinning too fast. "I need time," she said finally. I can't talk about this now." He gave a small nod, understanding. "Of course. Take all the time you need." And just like that, he walked away, leaving her, standing there with a glass of water in her hand and thoughts racing through her head. People started to leave. The house grew quieter. One by one, the guests said their final goodbyes and disappeared into the night. Left alone, she wandered through the empty rooms of the house. Their house. Every corner held a memory. Their first Christmas tree that fell over. The kitchen counter where they burned pancakes more than once. The couch where they watched old movies and fell asleep in each other's arms. She made her way upstairs, feeling the weight of everything settle back on her shoulders. In the bedroom, she opened the closet to pull out an old sweater, his favorite. She needed something familiar, something that still smelled like him. That's when she saw it. A shoebox tucked away on the top shelf. Dusty, forgotten. She pulled it down carefully. Inside were photos, ticket stubs from concerts, postcards from places they visited, nothing unusual. Then, Under a stack of papers, she found a sealed envelope. It had her name on it, in his handwriting. Her breath caught. She sat down slowly on the bed, the letter in her trembling hands. Should she open it? What if it hurt? What if it broke her all over again? She looked around the room like someone might tell her what to do. But there was no one. With a deep breath, she slid her finger under the seal and opened it. The letter was short, but the words hit her like a wave. Hey, love, if you're reading this, then I guess I didn't make it. I hope this letter finds you before too long. I didn't tell you because I didn't want your last days with me to be filled with sadness. I wanted them to be full of joy, like our life always has been. Don't blame yourself. Don't wonder what you could have done. There was nothing anyone could have done. Live well, love deeply. If someone ever makes you smile again, let them in. Just know that wherever I am, I'm cheering for you. Always. Her eyes welled up again, but this time it wasn't just pain. There was warmth in those words. Comfort. Closure, maybe. She read it again. And again. Daniel had known he was going to die. And he hadn't told her. Why? Because he loved her. Enough to protect her from the pain for as long as he could. She pressed the letter to her chest, tears falling silently onto the carpeted floor. Outside, the wind gently tapped against the window. Quiet. Peaceful. And for the first time since the accident, she didn't feel quite so alone. Days passed, but the letter stayed tucked inside her purse. She carried it everywhere. Not because she needed to read it again, but because having it close made her feel like Daniel was still with her somehow. Life outside moved on as usual. Neighbors cutting grass, kids riding bikes, cars honking in the distance. But for her, time felt frozen. Every step forward felt heavy, like dragging herself through quicksand. She tried to focus on small things, cleaning out drawers, watering plants, making tea. But her mind kept circling back to Liam's words at the funeral. His proposal, or whatever it was, had been so unexpected, so raw. How could he say something like that when Daniel wasn't even buried yet? Was it selfishness? Desperation? Or maybe love? Love didn't make sense right now. Not to her. The idea of loving someone else felt impossible, like trying to climb a mountain without legs. But then again, Daniel had asked her to let someone in if they made her smile. Did Liam count? Could he ever? Her phone buzzed one afternoon, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, Maya. Hey, how are you holding up? Want me to come over? She stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Maya meant well, but talking about everything felt exhausting. Still, the loneliness was creeping in more each day. Finally, she typed back, Yeah, sure, thanks. Maya arrived within the hour, carrying a bag of groceries and a box of tissues. You look tired, she said gently, setting the bags down on the counter. Have you eaten today? I'm fine, she replied automatically, though truthfully she couldn't remember the last meal she'd finished. Food tasted like cardboard these days. They sat together in the living room, the silence between them comfortable but loaded. After a while, Maya broke it. People have been saying stuff. What kind of stuff? She asked, already bracing herself. About Liam, about what happened at the funeral. Of course. Small towns were great for gossip. Word traveled faster than wildfire here. She sighed, rubbing her temples. What did they say? That he's being disrespectful, that it's too soon, that you deserve better. Maya hesitated. But I think they're just upset because they don't understand. Love isn't always neat or convenient. Sometimes it surprises us. Surprises me? She echoed, shaking her head. It feels like it punched me in the gut. Maya reached over and placed a hand on hers. I get it, this is hard. You lost Daniel, and now Liam shows up out of nowhere dropping this bombshell. He might mean well, but timing matters. He barely knew Daniel, she said quietly. They weren't close. They hadn't talked in years. How can he stand there and act like he knows what Daniel would have wanted? Maybe he doesn't. Maya admitted. But maybe he's just scared too. Grief does strange things to people. Maybe he thought he was helping. Helping who? Himself? Or you? Maya countered softly. Think about it. He saw you standing there, broken and lost. Maybe he thought offering himself a chance at happiness was the best thing he could do. She didn't respond. Instead, she looked down at her hands, tracing the lines on her palms absent-mindedly. Maya had a point, but it didn't make things easier. If anything, it made them messier. Later that evening, after Maya left, she found herself staring at her phone again. There was a voicemail from Liam waiting for her. She almost deleted it without listening, but curiosity won out. His voice was hesitant, almost shy. Hey, it's me. I know I probably shouldn't call, but I wanted to check in. I hope you're doing okay. I want you to know I meant what I said. But I also respect whatever decision you make. Take care. The message ended abruptly, leaving her sitting there in stunned silence. He sounded sincere. Vulnerable even. Nothing like the arrogant, impulsive man everyone assumed he was. Why couldn't life be simpler? Why did grief have to bring all these complicated emotions bubbling to the surface? The next morning, she woke up early and decided to take a walk. Fresh air might help clear her head. The streets were quiet, bathed in soft sunlight. As she strolled past familiar houses and shops, memories of Daniel flooded her mind. Their first date at the little cafe on Main Street. The summer picnic, where they laughed until their sides hurt. The way he used to hold her hand during long drives, humming along to old songs on the radio. But mixed in with those happy memories were darker ones. The arguments, the misunderstandings, the times. They drifted apart before finding their way back to each other. Love wasn't perfect. It was messy and flawed and beautiful all at once. Daniel had taught her that, and now Liam was asking her to start over, to risk opening her heart again. She stopped by the park and sat on a bench overlooking the pond. Ducks swam lazily across the water, ripples spreading outward in gentle circles. A child nearby giggled as his father chased him around, pretending to be a monster. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future, a different one where laughter came easy again, where mornings weren't filled with emptiness. But then reality crashed back in. She wasn't ready, not yet, maybe not ever. Still, she couldn't ignore the fact that Liam cared. Whether it was genuine or misplaced didn't matter right now. What mattered was that he showed up when most people wouldn't. He didn't run away from her pain. He stepped into it awkwardly but bravely. By the time she got home, she'd made up her mind. She wouldn't shut him out completely. She owed it to herself and to Daniel to give the situation some thought. Not because she owed Liam anything, but because shutting people out wouldn't bring Daniel back. Closure didn't mean forgetting. It meant finding peace. That night she wrote him a short note, just a few sentences really, enough to let him know she appreciated his honesty and kindness, but not enough to give false hope. When she sealed the envelope and placed it on the kitchen table, she felt a tiny weight lift off her chest. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Tomorrow would be another day, another step forward, even if every step felt like walking on glass. The days blurred together after she sent that note to Liam. She didn't hear back from him right away, which was both a relief and a disappointment. A part of her wondered if he'd given up, decided she wasn't worth the effort. Another part hoped he understood that she needed space, time, and quiet to figure out what came next. But life had other plans. One afternoon, while sorting through Daniel's belongings in the attic, she stumbled upon something unexpected. The attic was cluttered, a mix of old furniture, dusty photo albums, and boxes stacked haphazardly. She hadn't ventured up there since before the accident. Now it felt like stepping into a time capsule, each item holding fragments of their shared life. She opened one box after another, finding mementos they'd saved over the years. Ticket stubs from concerts, dried flowers from bouquets, even silly notes they'd scribbled to each other during lazy weekends. Each discovery brought a bittersweet smile to her face. These were pieces of Daniel, pieces of them. Then she spotted it, a small shoebox shoved into the corner of a shelf, almost hidden behind an old lamp. Curious, she pulled it down and brushed off the layer of dust covering it. The box wasn't sealed, but something about it felt important, like it held secrets. Inside, she found a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon, along with a few photographs, and a folded piece of paper on top. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized Daniel's handwriting. The folded paper had her name scrawled across it in bold letters. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. This wasn't the same letter she'd read earlier, the one tucked inside his closet. No, this was different. It looked older, worn at the edges like it had been written long before his diagnosis. She sat cross-legged on the attic floor, surrounded by memories, and began to read. Hey, love, if you're reading this, then I guess I'm not around anymore. But don't worry. I'm not writing this because I think anything bad is going to happen. I just figured it's good to leave some things unsaid while we still can, you know? Just in case. First off, I want you to know how much you mean to me. You've been my rock, my light, my everything. Loving you has been the best thing I've ever done. And no matter where I am or what happens, please remember that I'll always be with you. In the little things, the big things, the everyday moments. Now, on to something harder. Remember how I told you once that Liam and I weren't close? Well, that's true, but it's also complicated. We haven't talked in years because of something stupid, something I should have fixed a long time ago. I let pride get in the way and now it feels too late. But if anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll try to reconnect with him. He's family, even if he doesn't act like it sometimes. And deep down, he's a good guy. He just hides it well. She paused, blinking back tears. Family. That word carried so much weight. She'd always thought of Liam as distant, awkward, someone who existed on the fringes of their lives. But Daniel saw him differently, or at least he wanted her to. The letter continued. I know this might sound crazy, especially coming from me, but don't shut people out. Let them in, even if it's hard, even if it's scary. Life is too short to hold grudges or push people away. If Liam reaches out, give him a chance. For me. Her chest tightened. Was this fate, coincidence, or just another cruel twist of grief messing with her mind? Here was Daniel, urging her to connect with the very person who had thrown her world into chaos just weeks ago. She set the letter aside and picked up the bundle of letters tied with the ribbon. They were addressed to Liam, dated months apart, but none of them seemed to have been sent. Some were apologies, others updates about their lives, weddings, promotions, vacations. Each one ended with a plea for reconciliation. Why hadn't Daniel mailed them? Why had he kept these words locked away instead of reaching out, and why was she only discovering them now? Questions swirled in her head, but one thing became clear. Daniel had regrets. Big ones. And maybe Liam did too. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table staring at the letters spread out in front of her. She poured herself a cup of tea, letting the warmth seep into her hands. Outside, the sky turned shades of purple and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, breaking the silence. She thought about Liam again, about the proposal, or whatever it was, at the funeral, about the voicemail he'd left, his voice shaky but sincere. Could she really blame him for wanting to reach out? For wanting to fill the void left behind by Daniel? Maybe Maya was right. Grief made people do strange things. Maybe Liam wasn't being selfish. Maybe he was just lost. Like her. Still, forgiveness didn't come easily. Trusting someone new felt impossible when her heart was still tethered to Daniel. How could she move forward without leaving him behind? But Daniel himself had asked her to try, to let Liam in, to forgive. She sighed, resting her forehead against her palm. Tomorrow would bring clarity, or at least she hoped it would. For now, she gathered the letters and tucked them back into the shoebox. She placed it carefully on the dining table where it wouldn't be forgotten again. As she climbed into bed later that night, exhaustion finally catching up to her, she whispered softly into the dark, "I'll try, Daniel. For you." Sleep came, slowly, but when it did, it carried dreams of laughter, sunlight, and voices calling her name. The next morning, she woke up with a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in weeks, her mind wasn't clouded with confusion or guilt. Instead, clarity nudged its way in, a quiet voice telling her what needed to be done. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew one thing for sure. Daniel had asked her to try, to forgive, to let Liam in. And if there was even a sliver of hope that doing so might honor Daniel's memory, then she owed it to herself, and to him, to take that step. After breakfast, she grabbed the shoebox from the dining table and carried it outside. The air smelled fresh, crisp, like the world was waking up alongside her. She climbed into her car, the box resting gently on the passenger seat, and drove toward Liam's place. She hadn't been there before, but Maya had mentioned once where he lived, a small house on the outskirts of town surrounded by trees and fields. When she arrived, she hesitated before getting out of the car. What would she say? How would he react? Would he understand why she'd come? Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel as doubt crept in. But then she remembered Daniel's words, his plea to reconnect, and took a deep breath. She could do this, she had to. She knocked on the door, heart pounding in her chest. After a moment, it opened, revealing Liam standing there, looking surprised but not unwelcoming. He wore an old flannel shirt and jeans, his hair slightly messy, like he'd just woken up. "Hey," he said softly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I didn't expect to see you." "I didn't expect to come," she admitted, holding up the shoebox. "But I found something I think you should see." He stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in. The inside of the house was cozy, cluttered but lived in. There were books stacked on shelves, mismatched furniture, and a guitar leaning against the wall. It felt like a home built for comfort, not appearances. She sat down on the couch, placing the shoebox on the coffee table between them. Liam watched her curiously, waiting for her to explain. "This belonged to Daniel," she began, opening the box carefully. "It was in the attic. Inside there are letters. Letters he wrote to you." Liam's expression shifted instantly. Confusion turned to shock, then sadness. "Letters?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, pulling out the bundle tied with the ribbon. "He never sent them, but he kept them. All these years he held on to them." Liam reached out hesitantly, taking the bundle from her hands. His fingers brushed against hers briefly, sending a jolt of emotion through both of them. She looked away, giving him space to process. As he untied the ribbon and flipped through the letters, his eyes widened. "These are from years ago," he murmured. "Why didn't he send them?" "I don't know," she replied honestly. "Maybe he thought it was too late, or maybe he was scared, but they're here now, and I think he wanted us to read them, together." Liam swallowed hard, setting the letters down on the table. "I had no idea," he said quietly. I thought he didn't care anymore." "He did care," she insisted. "Maybe he didn't show it the way he should have, but he cared. These letters prove that." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of the discovery settling over them. Finally, Liam spoke again. "I've spent so much time blaming him, for everything. For the fight we had, for pushing me away, for dying." His voice cracked on the last word, and he looked down, ashamed. "But reading this, it makes me realize how much I messed up too." "You both made mistakes," she said gently. "People do, that's part of being human. But Daniel wanted us to fix things, to start over." Liam nodded slowly, tears welling up in his eyes. "I want that too. If you'll let me." She hesitated, searching his face for sincerity. What she saw was vulnerability, regret, and a genuine desire to make amends. It wasn't perfect. It couldn't erase the pain of losing Daniel, but it was a beginning. "There's something else," she added, pulling out the letter addressed to her. "Daniel wrote this recently. before he died. He told me to give you a chance, to reconnect. Liam's hands shook as he accepted the letter. As he read it, his shoulders sagged like the weight of years of misunderstanding was finally lifting. When he finished, he set it down carefully, wiping his eyes. I don't deserve this, he said hoarsely. Any of it. But I promise, I'll do better. Starting now, she nodded, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within her. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step forward. Over the next hour they talked, really talked for the first time. They shared memories of Daniel, laughed at old stories, and cried over the ones that hurt the most. They didn't shy away from the difficult topics, their estrangement, their grief, the awkwardness of his proposal at the funeral. Slowly, tentatively, they began to rebuild the bridge that had been burned long ago. By the time she left, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. As she drove home, she realized something. Healing didn't happen overnight. It came in moments, in conversations, in discoveries, in choices to move forward despite the pain. That night, she placed the shoebox on her bedside table, feeling a newfound sense of peace. Daniel's voice echoed in her mind, soft and reassuring. Let them in. And for the first time since his death, she believed she could. Weeks passed after that day at Liam's house, and life began to shift in small, subtle ways. The heaviness of grief didn't disappear. It never fully would, but it softened, like a storm easing into a gentle rain. She still carried Daniel, with her every day, but now there was room for other emotions too. Curiosity, hope, even laughter. She started seeing Liam more often, not every day, not even every week, but enough to feel like they were building something new. They'd meet, for coffee or take walks by the river, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they talked about Daniel, sharing stories, laughing at old jokes, remembering the man who had shaped both their lives in different ways. Other times, they avoided mentioning him altogether, focusing instead on the present moment. It wasn't easy. There were moments when guilt crept in, whispering cruel things in her ear. How can you sit here smiling when Daniel is gone? How can you let someone else fill his place? But then she'd remind herself of Daniel's letter, the one where he told her to let people in, to live well, to love deeply. And slowly, those whispers faded. One afternoon, as they strolled along the riverbank, Liam stopped suddenly and turned to face her. I've been thinking, he said, his voice hesitant but steady, about what happened at the funeral. About everything. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't expected this conversation today. Okay, she replied cautiously. What about it? I know I messed up, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. Proposing to you like that, it was reckless, selfish even. I wasn't thinking about how hard it must have been for you to hear that. All I knew was that I cared about you and I didn't want to lose you before I even got the chance to know you. She nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. I understand why you did it, she said finally. But it was a lot to process, especially then. I get that, he said quickly. And I'm sorry. For everything. For pushing too fast. For not respecting your space. He trailed off, shaking his head. For being an idiot. A small laugh escaped her lips despite herself. You're not an idiot, she said softly. You're just trying. Like me. They stood there for a moment, the sound of the river flowing behind them, filling the silence between them. Then Liam spoke again, his voice quieter this time. Do you think we could start over from scratch? No pressure, no expectations. Just two people figuring things out together. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the sincerity in his eyes. He wasn't perfect, far from it. But neither was she. And maybe that was okay. Maybe perfection wasn't the point. Maybe the point was simply showing up day after day and choosing to keep going. I think we already are, she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Starting over, I mean. He smiled back, relief washing over his face. Good, he said, because I don't want to screw this up. Neither do I. The days turned into weeks and their bond grew stronger. They weren't rushing anything. They were taking it slow, savoring each step forward. She found comfort in Liam's presence, in the way he listened without judgment, in the way he made her laugh when she least expected it. But she also noticed the cracks beneath the surface, the lingering pain of loss, the unanswered questions about Daniel, the weight of their shared history. One evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset, she decided it was time to confront some of those cracks. "Can I ask you something?" she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Of course," Liam replied, turning to look at her. "When Daniel and I first got married, you didn't come to the wedding. Why?" Liam sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I wanted to," he said, "but I was angry. At him. At myself. We hadn't spoken in years by then, and I convinced myself it didn't matter, that missing his wedding wouldn't change anything." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But it did. It made things worse, and I regret it every single day." She studied his face, searching for signs of dishonesty, but all she saw was regret and truth. "Why were you so angry?" she asked gently. "What happened between you two?" "It's stupid, really," he muttered, staring down at his hands. "We had a fight about money, about Dad's will. He thought I was irresponsible, and maybe I was. But instead of talking it out, we just stopped talking. Completely. And once the silence took over, it felt impossible to break." "That must have been hard," she said quietly. "Losing your brother like that?" "It was," he admitted. "But I made it harder than it needed to be. Pride is a funny thing. It makes you hold on to grudges longer than you should." She nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She'd held on to her own share of grudges over the years, letting anger cloud her judgment. But Daniel had taught her the importance of forgiveness, of letting go. And now, sitting here with Liam, she realized he was learning that lesson too. "You're not alone in this," she said after a moment. "Figuring things out, I mean. We're doing it together." He smiled faintly, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply, "for giving me another chance." "You gave me one too," she replied, "in your own way." They sat there for a while longer, the sky darkening around them, stars beginning to peek through the clouds. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of peace, a sense that, no matter how messy life became, she wasn't facing it alone. Few days later, she received a package in the mail. It was addressed to her, but the handwriting wasn't familiar. Curious, she opened it and found a photo album inside. On the cover, scrawled in bold letters, was a note. "For you. Love, Daniel." Her heart skipped a beat as she flipped through the pages. The album was filled with pictures of her and Daniel. Some she recognized, others she'd never seen before. There were captions beneath each photo, written in his unmistakable handwriting. "Our first road trip. So many wrong turns. So much fun. Dancing in the kitchen. You always hated my moves, but you laughed anyway. Sunset picnic. Remember how we almost set the blanket on fire?" Tears streamed down her face as she turned the last page. Tucked inside was a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully, her hands trembling. "Hey, love, if you're reading this, then I guess I'm really gone, but don't cry too much, okay? Life is short, but it's also beautiful. Promise me you'll keep living it, to the fullest. Take risks. Laugh until your sides hurt. Love fiercely. And don't forget to smile. Oh, and if Liam ever sends you this album, tell him I forgive him. Tell him I love him. And tell him to stop being such a stubborn jerk." She laughed through her tears, clutching the album to her chest. Daniel's voice was loud and clear, even in death. He was still guiding her, still cheering her on. When Liam called later that night, she told him about the album and Daniel's message. "He forgave you," she said softly, long before either of us realized it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I don't deserve that," Liam said finally. "But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to." Earn it. She smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Me too, she whispered. Me too. Months passed and life began to take on a rhythm she hadn't expected. A slower, gentler pace that allowed room for healing without rushing it. The sharp edges of grief had dulled, replaced by something softer. Acceptance. Not forgetting. Never forgetting, but learning how to carry Daniel's memory forward instead of letting it weigh her down. She still missed him every day. Some mornings, she'd wake up and reach for him instinctively, only to remember he wasn't there. But now when those moments came, they didn't feel as empty. Instead, they felt like reminders. Little nudges from the universe telling her to keep going, to honor the love they'd shared by living fully. Liam became a steady presence in her life. He didn't try to replace Daniel. He didn't even attempt to fill the void left behind. Instead, he simply showed up, for coffee dates, for quiet evenings, for random phone calls just to check in. His kindness wasn't flashy or dramatic. It was quiet, consistent, and real. And somehow, that made all the difference. One Saturday morning, she decided to visit the park where she and Daniel used to spend lazy afternoons. She brought along the photo album he'd sent her, flipping through its pages as she walked. Each picture brought back memories. The way he laughed at her terrible jokes, the way his hand always found hers no matter where they were, the way he made everything seem possible. As she sat on a bench overlooking the pond, she realized something. Daniel wasn't gone. Not really. He lived in the laughter of strangers, in the warmth of the sun on her face, in the stories people told about him. He lived in her heart, in Liam's newfound determination to reconnect with family, in the lessons he'd taught them both about forgiveness and love. Lost in thought, she barely noticed when someone approached her. It was an older woman, frail, but kind-eyed, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Excuse me," the woman said gently. "Are you Emily?" "Yes," she replied, surprised. "Do I know you?" The woman shook her head. "No, but I knew your husband, Daniel. He helped my grandson once, fixed his bike when it broke down near his office. Never asked for anything in return, just smiled and said, 'Pay it forward.'" She handed over the flowers. "I wanted to thank you for sharing him with us." Tears welled up in her eyes as she accepted the flowers. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means so much." The encounter stayed with her long after the woman left. It reminded her of why she loved Daniel, not just because he was hers, but because he belonged to everyone he touched. His kindness rippled outward, touching lives in ways she'd never fully understand. Later that week, she called Liam. "Let's plant a tree," she said suddenly. "For Daniel." "A tree?" he asked, sounding confused but intrigued. "Yes," she explained. "Something that grows, something alive. A symbol of everything he gave us and everything we're trying to build together." He agreed immediately, and the next day they went to a nursery to pick out the perfect sapling. They chose a maple tree, its leaves fiery red even in early spring. Together they dug a hole in her backyard, planted the tree, and watered it carefully. As they stood back to admire their work, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. "This is beautiful," Liam said softly. "Daniel would have liked it." "He would have," she agreed, smiling faintly. "But I think he'd like what we're doing even more. Trying, growing." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, laughing, and reminiscing about Daniel. For the first time in months, the conversation didn't feel heavy. It felt celebratory, like they weren't just mourning his loss, but honoring his life. Weeks turned into months, and the tree began to grow. Its branches stretched toward the sky, sturdy and strong, just like Daniel had been. She visited it often, sometimes alone, sometimes with Liam. Sometimes she'd sit beneath it, reading or writing letters she never intended to send. Other times she'd simply sit in silence, watching the leaves dance in the wind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Liam joined her under the tree. You've changed, he said, quietly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. How so? She asked, glancing at him curiously. You're lighter, he replied. Not like before, you still miss him, I can see that. But you're not carrying the weight of it all anymore, you're moving forward. She nodded slowly, understanding what he meant. It's not easy, she admitted. Some days are harder than others, but I'm trying. That's all anyone can do, right? Right, he agreed, smiling faintly. And you're not alone in it. No, she said softly. I'm not. They sat there for a while longer, the world around them quiet and peaceful. When the stars began to appear, Liam stood up and held out his hand. Come on, he said. Let's go inside. It's getting cold. She took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. As they walked back toward the house, she glanced over her shoulder, one last time at the tree. Its silhouette stood tall against the darkening sky, a testament to growth, resilience, and hope. Inside, she brewed tea and lit a few candles, filling the room with warmth and light. Liam sat across from her, leaning back in his chair, looking content. For the first time in a long time, she felt the same. I got a letter today, she said after a moment, pulling an envelope from her pocket. From Maya. Oh yeah? What did she say? She said she's proud of me, she replied, smiling faintly. Proud of how far I've come, how I haven't given up. Well, she's right, Liam said firmly. You're amazing. She laughed softly, shaking her head. I'm not amazing, I'm just surviving. One day at a time. That's enough, he said. Surviving is enough. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his words. Surviving wasn't failure. It was triumph. Every breath, every step forward was proof that she was still here, still fighting, still living. As the night wore on, they talked about plans for the future. Not big ones, just small steps. Maybe redecorating the living room, maybe taking a trip somewhere new, maybe inviting friends over for dinner again. The details didn't matter. What mattered was the possibility, the idea that tomorrow could be brighter than today. When Liam finally left, she locked the door behind him and turned off the lights. In the darkness, she climbed into bed, clutching the photo album to her chest. Before drifting off to sleep, she whispered softly into the quiet room. Thank you, Daniel. For everything. And for the first time in months, she fell asleep with a smile on her face. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, waking her gently. Outside, birds chirped happily and the air smelled fresh and clean. She stepped onto the porch, sipping her coffee, and looked out at the tree swaying gently in the breeze. Life wasn't perfect. It probably never would be. But it was good, good enough. And that was all she needed.